What matters to me is the price it costs to launch. Now, reusable rockets allow that price to come down dramatically, right? And so
Mhm.
what's happening, we're seeing, is the price of launch just come down by orders of magnitude to the point where we can send a commercially viable deep space mission. On top of that,
Mhm.
we're seeing SpaceX now introduce high energy launches. So these are launches to the moon or directly into deep space that we can buy slots on. And by buying those, like we did on Intuitive Machines Launch 2, we now can build a much smaller craft that can go all the way out to the asteroid, right? It's a totally game changer for us. We can.
Okay, Matt. So, what are the benefits of asteroid mining?
Yeah. So let's start off with one of the biggest problems the world faces, and that is mining as a whole. Mining's now, you can read whatever estimate you want, and there's a ton out there, but minings are upwards of 28% of global emissions. We see this across the board. There was a major article that came out about a week ago about Germany having to destroy a major wind project because of its mining for coal. Like, we are a hungry species for resources, and that's not going to slow down. That's only speeding up. And as we do this, we deplete the earth of its resources. We deplete the land of what is needed. We leave these big open pits. We refine things that we want and leave what we don't want, which in many cases is toxic. It's referred to as tailings. And we need a solution that makes sense for our way of life. Most of the solutions right now, just like anything, when you kind of look at the climate area, involve you taking a step back on your way of life, using less energy, using less of your house, not running your air conditioning, whatever that entails. I believe we need solutions that don't require you to change what you're doing. And the solution that we have found and we have honed in on is specifically regarded to the platinum group metals. We know about these concentrations of metals in space. We know they're very, very high. And AstroForge is setting out to go mine them and replace this harmful practice on Earth.
In terms of, you said something about platinum grade metals,
Sorry, I should say platinum group metals. I
platinum
misspoke.
group metals.
Platinum group metals. So the six elements that make up a ton of, you're probably not going to recognize the names of them, so I don't repeat them. But essentially, your
Sure.
cell phone uses all six of them. These are industrial metals that are used across the board, that we use in pretty much everything electronic we touch and somewhat we don't touch, right? Your catalytic converter in your car has three of these metals in it. They're a major way, a catalyst to reduce emissions. They're used in making glass. They're used in chemotherapy drugs, right? These are very, very industrial use metals that we need to survive.
Right. And you said that these are abundant in space, they're abundant in asteroids. And so, in your mind, do you think that as soon as AstroForge starts mining these asteroids, there's going to be this immediate shift towards, duh, obviously we should mine asteroids in space and stop mining on Earth? Or do you think it's going to take a little while for, I guess, the culture to enlighten itself and like get on the trend of, okay, let's start shifting towards asteroid mining? What are your thoughts around that?
I think as soon as we mine an asteroid, there will be an immediate shift to, yes, we should have done this. That's not the question we're asking right now. And I think the question that you should be asking right now is like, can we fucking mine an asteroid? Right? That's
Yeah.
an unproven thing that we have to go and show we can do. Now, we've sent vehicles out to asteroids. We've landed on them, as a human species. Government organizations have taken samples, brought them back to Earth. And those are all good technical milestones that lead to the end goal. But we still have a lot to prove. We got to make that process a lot cheaper. We got to do it at a commercial scale. And we got to do it in a way that makes business sense. And that involves a lot of decisions, a lot of tech development that we have not completed yet. That is part of the roadmap we're on right now.
Right. And so speaking of that roadmap, speaking about the business, how is AstroForge leading the way to mine asteroids? How are you guys getting there? What new things are you guys doing in terms of mining asteroids?
Yeah, one of the first new things we're doing is designing the world's first in-space refinery. So we sent this up to space about 3 weeks ago on Transporter 7. And this satellite will go up there and show that we can refine a piece of essentially what we believe to be the asteroid makeup, primarily
Mhm.
iron with a little bit of platinum group metals and some other metals sprinkled in there, and can refine it into the platinum group metals itself. And so that is a demonstration mission we're setting up. Now, keep in mind, this will be the first time anybody's ever refined in space, specifically refined the platinum group metals. That's our first milestone. Our second milestone, which we are launching currently on schedule right now aboard a Falcon 9 in October, is a vehicle that will go out to the asteroid and take high resolution images of it to confirm what type of asteroid it is. Now, we believe the asteroid we've selected to be one of these metallic or M-type asteroids that we're going after, but we need to confirm it with high-res imagery, and that's what we plan on doing in the mission in October.
Speaking specifically to the asteroids, it seems like I feel like when people say asteroid mining, people just think every single asteroid has metal, every single asteroid contains this. Is that true, or is it more on the uncommon side where you have to actually look very hard and find those asteroids that have these resources we're looking for?
So I'm going to say this a little differently. I have no idea. And the reason I have no idea is we've never been to a lot of these asteroids. We haven't sampled them. We've touched down on very few. We've only brought a couple samples left. What we do have is what we call the meteoritic database. And what this is all the meteorites, aka asteroids that have hit the Earth and are recovered. And from this, we can derive distributions of what metal concentrations we believe are on each type of asteroid. When it comes to the metallic or M-type asteroids, that concentration is very, very high, right? We're talking orders of magnitude better platinum group metal concentration than what we have on Earth. We actually still see a much higher grade of platinum ore on even the carbonaceous or stony type asteroids as we go out there, but they're not as great. They're not as good. They're a little bit harder for us to land on or to mine or to understand across the board. But most of the data we have is from that meteoritic database.
Fascinating. And just speaking to the priors of all of the asteroids that have hit Earth, or at least the amounts being very high containing these metals. I remember Jeff Bezos saying that, the future is in space and that we could mine enough asteroids to like build an entire wall around the planet out of metal. Like that's how much resources that are out there. So speaking to that, what does the future of the space economy look like if lots of companies like yourself and others are mining asteroids? Where does your mind go in the next 10, 30, 50 years?
My mind doesn't go very far. I'm not a futurist. I'm not someone who's going to predict that we're going to build Dyson spheres or kind of like these crazy things in space. We're really focused on an earthbound problem, and that is the lack of a specific resource, the platinum group metals on Earth. And that's what AstroForge is focusing on. We have no plans right now to return these to space or to return these to the moon or to Mars. And those markets may develop, those may come online. There's a lot of really cool companies, I think, trying really cool things out there. But the reality is they haven't done it yet. And until they do it, it's not a quantifiable market. And I really want to be very grounded with this company. We're going after a very well understood quantifiable market, and that is the platinum group metal market.
Sure. And speaking about the earthbound problems, I think we touched on, I think in the initial minutes of the conversation about how mining is contributing to climate change. So how does asteroid mining benefit climate change? And, in your mind, where does it go from there?
Yeah, I mean, one of the best ways to not harm the Earth is to do that harmful process not on the Earth, right? And I think asteroid mining lends itself the best to it because you don't have to bring up a large amount of equipment. It's a very small amount of equipment with our refinery. Most of the heavy processing is done. All of the waste can be left in space. And we're talking, hundreds of millions of miles away from Earth. We're not talking about in low Earth orbit, right? These are very, very far
Right.
away that we can do. And so that whole harmful process of the waste, the emissions, all of that is left in the universe, somewhere where we don't care. We're not harming our planet. And that's what we plan on doing.
When you're launching these satellites, I've heard, or I've read rather, about space junk. Like in low Earth orbit or maybe a bit higher, it's a bunch of, I guess, grain-sized things that are flying. How does that impact space mining? Am I going too far, or is this
No,
in your
it's
thoughts?
it's a great question. I think a lot of people have confusion here. For us, it doesn't affect it at all. Now, keep in mind, we are not operating in low Earth orbit, right? So low Earth orbit is getting polluted. We have a lot of satellites. You have things like Starlink going up. We're talking about
Yeah.
blocking of stars and all of this. And I think there's some real concerns there as we go forward. That is about 400 miles or 400 to 500 kilometers above the Earth. We're going 200 million kilometers away. There's no space junk up
Mhm.
where we are, right? That is not a concern at
Yeah, yeah.
all. Those orbits are very, very different. We're not even in Earth's orbit. We're in the orbit around the sun. It's called heliocentric orbit. So it's a very different way to think about this. Space junk does not really affect us. We simply travel right through Leo and leave on a rocket.
Why 200 million miles?
That's where these near Earth asteroids are, right? That's where we
Mhm.
see these asteroids. Now I'm using that as a general rule of thumb. But
Sure.
as a general way to look at this is they are not in Earth's orbit. They're in orbit around the sun at different periods of days. So we have to travel out to them pretty far away. These are not in between us and the moon.
See, but one of the things that pops into my mind is that when we mine on Earth, once we've mined, we instantly have those resources. But if we're going to mine on asteroids, we not only have to go find the asteroid and then, maybe when it's more mature, we'll know exactly how much material and how far the asteroid is, but we have to bring it back. And how do we deal with that in terms of instead of harming the planet, we're actually harming our time horizons?
So we don't bring the asteroid back. We only bring back the platinum group metals. We do the refining of the asteroid on site. So we take our spacecraft out, we dock with the asteroid, we refine that asteroid in situ, right? So in its space. It takes about 3 months to do this. We pull out the platinum group metals and then we send those back to Earth. So that is how we do it. So we're not bringing back an asteroid to mine, with whatever concentration you have, or we'd still have the waste, we'd still have to pump the energy in. We're only bringing back the material we care about.
But it still doesn't answer the question in the sense of it would take more time to bring those metals back, right? And so how do we deal with the amount of time that it'll take to go mine that for 3 months and then bring all of the metals back? Because are people going to go to that or say it's going to take too long?
It takes about a year to bring the metals back. We know what those quantities are. Keep in mind, like this is anything. You have to be forward projecting on your economic projection of how much metal you can bring back, what the market will take. And you have to do a little bit more planning than you would have to do at a mine. But I want to be clear that like classical mines now are actually very long planning cycles. From ore discovery to actually digging for the mine can be upwards of 10 years, right? So it's not like these things are happening overnight either. These are very, very long tailwinds that happen. I mean, this is a commodity product. This is kind of how it works. We don't see the 12-month period as actually being detrimental at all. It's just something that it takes to travel that distance.
No, that's really good to know, and that something I just learned that I thought it was going to be, oh, I thought it was a much more expedited thing, the on-Earth mines. But if you're saying that it's around a 10-year process, even space mining makes more sense than anything. Um, How has SpaceX changed asteroid mining? You said something about Falcon 9 in the coming months. How does the entire movement of SpaceX and the revolutionization of reusable rockets, how does that impact asteroid mining?
Yeah, I mean, reusable rockets don't matter to me. What matters to me is the price it costs to launch. Now, reusable rockets allow that price to come down dramatically, right? And so what's happening, we're seeing, is the price of launch just come down by orders of magnitude to the point where we can send a commercially viable deep space mission. On top of that, we're seeing SpaceX now introduce high energy launches. So these are launches to the moon or directly into deep space that we can buy slots on. And by buying those, like we did on Intuitive Machines Launch 2, we now can build a much smaller craft that can go all the way out to the asteroid, right? It's a totally good game changer for us. We can now spend a small amount of money to get all the way out to deep space, build a much cheaper craft, and really give this an honest try of making it happen without building a $1 billion plus NASA mission, that takes a $500 million rocket to launch it. So the unit economics here are totally different than they were, even to be honest with you, 2 years ago. And that's what allows a company like this to exist and to thrive.
What is your background, by the way? How did you find yourself at AstroForge and interested in space mining?
Yeah, I mean, my background it's always been, since I was a little kid, a deep interest in space. I think anybody that's in the space industry has always dreamed about it. I've always loved deep space exploration. It's always been something I've been a huge fan of. I spent about 5 years working at a company called Virgin Orbit. They were building a launch vehicle that would drop off the wing of a 747 and go to space. So I have kind of a history of building in space and understanding what that means. Before that, I did some internships at NASA, and there was a couple other career things in there that I won't dive into. My co-founder, Jose, spent about 4 years at SpaceX in the very early days and some time at NASA as well. So we both had a really big passion for space, but I think we were both kind of over building launch vehicles, right? Like you've built a rocket,
Sure.
they're cool, you really understand it, but I didn't want to keep building rockets. Like I felt like I had done that. We actually met discussing a job that we both were offered from JPL. To go work on the Europa Clipper mission and thinking like, should we go do that? We always want to do deep space. What should we go do? We weren't ready to go work for a government organization, right? These are big bureaucracies that are kind of slow in the way they do business. They can be very stable positions, but they're very slow. And that's not what we wanted to do. We wanted to mix startup and deep space exploration. And that's where AstroForge came from.
Wow. So you have a very ingrained history in the space, arena, let's say. So how has it changed as you've been in the space?
How has what changed? What do you mean?
Like the entire industry in terms of, is it still slow today? Are things speeding up? Are people kind of waking up because of SpaceX?
Um, I don't think it has anything to do with people are people, and we've always been the same. I think the clear differentiator now is that the cost to launch is much cheaper. And so if the cost, think about it this way, if the cost to go to space was $1, you'd have a lot more people trying random things to go to space. Like, who cares? It cost me $1. right? If it's
Yeah.
$100,000, you still get a lot of people. If it's $1 million, you get a little bit less people. If it's $1 billion, you get very few people that can afford it. And what we've seen is that scale constantly go down. So it is much, much cheaper than it was 10 years ago to go to space. What does that mean? You get a lot more companies that are willing to try. I mean, really, let's give a lot of credit to some of the people before us, like Planet Labs, right? Launching up iPhones and saying, like, we can do this because the cost to launch is now coming to a price point where we can try this. You have a lot of constellations now, and we're just the next phase of that. We're just the company saying, hey, what if we apply those same techniques, but we push past Leo, we push past Geo, we push out into the cosmos? And that's what we did.
What exactly was your fascination with deep space? Like, where were you thinking about just the stars? Were you thinking about living on another planet? Or where
No,
did
to me,
that
it's always
fascination
been,
come from?
yeah, I mean, we have some really deep questions about space that we still don't know. Does
Mm,
dark energy exist? Does dark matter exist? Why are these gravity orbits different? There's a lot of things that mathematically we don't understand in space. And
mm.
every time we go out there and we explore it, we find out a little bit more and a little bit more. And a lot of times it leads to actually more questions. But I love that. That is the last phase of exploration. We have discovered our planet. We've been to the poles. We've been to every continent on it at this point. And a lot of people before us were explorers. Well, the next exploration frontier is really space. And NASA's done a great job leading a lot of scientific missions to go do that. But now it's time to go look at them from the commercial standpoint, much like we did in the 1500s, right? When people started to really come to the Americas, probably for the wrong reasons, right? It was more for conquest than to get gold, but they were
Sure.
coming here for
Sure.
commercial reasons. Now, what happens if we go, we're essentially having that revolution now in space?
Wow. Wow. So 500 years later, we're still on that same path. Maybe for a little bit of a different reason, but the innateness of exploration is limitless in that sense. So let me just switch gears. What is a common misconception when thinking about space mining or asteroid mining that you found?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest misconception is that it's a sci-fi company that has no real goal to profitability and no real business case. Um,
Really?
and I want to be very clear, like, we are not a research company. Research is
Mm,
not what we're trying to do. We are trying to build a business around mining asteroids, right? And I think that you see a lot of Hollywood movies that have been produced. You may have watched The Expanse, where people live on the asteroid belt, or there's these big missions, or whatever's out there. Those are not realistic depictions of how this can happen or how it goes, but it gets ingrained in your psyche. Plus, we did have, companies that started in 2008, 2009, Planetary Resources, Deep Space Industries, that had an attempt at this, that really, really tried. And those are some great founders that did a lot of great things. And in fact, I don't think AstroForge is possible without those two companies coming before us. But they were acquired. They were in a way unsuccessful at meeting their task of mining an asteroid. And that means we have a lot to prove. Why do we think we're better than them? Why do we think we can do it when they can't? And you know, we don't think we're better than them. We just think we're farther along in time. And really, what that comes down to is cheaper launches, cheaper satellites, much more developed space infrastructure. And it's time to take another stab at it.
I want to just go back and ask, what was the moment? I think you mentioned with Jose, your co-founder partner. What was the moment where you realized that this is the mission now? Because I think that's a very important thing, especially for Gen Z to, I guess, wrap their heads around that regardless of how, you know, close to science fiction it is, or how difficult the problem may be, or how, absurd the task at hand could be. Like, you can still do it. And what was your moment where you were just like, fuck everything else. This is what I'm going to do for the time being. This is the problem I'm going to focus on.
I think this is a huge misconception that people have about a lot of companies in a lot of different ways. There was no eureka moment. There was no idea moment. There was no, this is what I'm going to dedicate my life to moment. Those things are growing, and they're growing internally, and they're growing through really dedication and perseverance to an idea you have and really seeing it all the way out. But when we first thought about this, we looked at why other companies had failed. It's not like I came up with this idea to go mine asteroids. It's been around forever. Could we do it? Then we spent a couple weeks just with pen and paper saying, like, do the physics even fucking work? Like, who cares if it's like, can you do it, right? And then what's been done, and can we get these prices for? And like, it was months of work to understand, could we build a refinery? Could we afford it? Could we raise the capital? Could we buy these rocket slots, right? Like, you really have to dive into it. And that is something that goes over time and is ingrained. I think when I was younger, I was looking to start a company based off some eureka moment idea that was going to pop into my head that was going to be the greatest thing ever. The reality is the hardest part about starting a company is just starting the company or
Mm.
going after your passion and what you want to do. You develop those along the way. You just have to try.
Were there any boundaries or barriers you had to cross in order to take that first step? Was it something that it just was innate in you, or was it something that you had to struggle with for a little bit and then, you know, take that leap?
I had to struggle with it for a long time. We all do. I didn't start a company when I was 18 years old, right? Coming out of high school. So I obviously struggled with it for a long time to understand, is this what I want to do? Do I want to take the risk? You know, starting a company and really going for it means that you are responsible for your failure. If this company fails, it will be because it failed because of me. No matter what the actual reason is, I'm the CEO, I'm the founder of the company. If it fails, it is my fault. And that's a lot of pressure to have on your shoulders. And I don't think a lot of people are built to operate like that. And you have to be willing to take that on, to take on that level of stress, to figure out how to manage it, and to figure out how to keep moving forward every single day with that level of, that level of responsibility as you go into the future.
Is there any reason why you don't think that people have the capacity to absorb that pressure? Is
Yes,
it people or is it Gen Z?
there's no, in my opinion, there's no differentiation between the generations that have ever come out, right? Like there's different
Mm.
resources available, there's different access, but I don't think Gen Z is any different than the millennials, really than it's any different than the baby boomers, than it's any different than the silent generation.
Wow.
Like we've all had,
Wow.
we're all people, we've all had our different theories, and culturally, there may be some differences or some explanation that can happen. But go read the biographies on the greats. Go read the autobiographies on the Sam Waltmans of the world, on the Steve Jobs of the world. These guys came from different generations, and in both of those cases, they had mentors from the previous generation that did the same
Mm.
thing they did. They just looked at a different swim lane. Whether it was Walmart looking at discount stores or Steve Jobs looking at the personal computer, the timing was right to make that company happen. But innately, I think if you would have taken Steve Jobs and put him 100 years earlier, he probably would have been the Steve Jobs of railroads. Like that was how he
Mm.
saw the world, right? And same for Sam Waltman. Like these guys are innately driven. They're very passionate about what they do, and they just weren't willing to fucking quit. And I think that's what you got to have to start a company. And we've actually seen this come out of Gen Z as well. There's plenty of people in that generation that have started companies that have gone for it, that have made big dents in the world as they've gone forward and will continue to. But I think that saying a generation has limitations or or anything like that is really a cop out. Every
Mm.
person is the same. Everybody has the same brain in their head. It's how you use it and how much responsibility and try you're willing to put into it.
Well, I mean, at the same time, like just to push back a little bit, Gen Z are in a precarious situation solely because of social media and, they're called the digital natives because they grew up with technology. And so it aids us in the sense that we are the first generation to, have an iPad, let's say, as a part of our childhood. We grew up around technology instead of adopting it. But it also limits us or affects us in a negative way because we grew up around Facebook. We grew up around Instagram. Our our brain was changed in the plastic sense around social media, around the metrics of liking and sharing and comments and attention and all of that. And so it does feel like Gen Z are separated in a sense from millennials and baby boomers and the silent generation. And there is a massive gap to motivate them. Um, that's why, I want to interview people like you because you guys are doing such fascinating work, such important work, but Gen Z doesn't seem to respond well, I guess, in the sense like they're not realizing that this is happening right now. The future is coming now. We need to start showing them that like we are working on space mining like yesterday. Like you guys are already sending out satellites. You guys are already planning all of this. You guys like it's possible. And I guess just going off of that, do you have any advice for Gen Z who are interested in the asteroid mining industry or just advice in general?
Yeah, let me say this. Two of the hardest working people at this company are Gen Zers.
Mm.
So, I think that again, going back to it and looking at the access to digital, don't look at it as a negative. It's a positive. You can now look up anything you want. You can go learn anything you fucking want. right? And what you want to do, and it takes a special type of person to say, I don't want to follow someone on TikTok all day. I want to go research. And those people are out there. And again, I don't think that's any different from any other generation. I really want to put this home as like, you know, people that were baby boomers, some of them read a lot of books about how to run businesses or how to create things or how to push the limits. You know, Elon Musk read a lot of books about how to go build a rocket. He wasn't innately born into a rocket scientist home, right? That knew this. He couldn't even look it up on the internet, but he still pushed for it. I actually think Gen Z has a huge advantage that they can go look this up on the internet and have access to all the technology in the world. It's really up to you as an individual on what you do with that. And I think, you know, anytime we look at these groups differently or as groups, we're kind of discrediting the people that are special. And every group has their special people. So, you know, all I'd say to every generation is be special, right? Go out there and do something that is going to get you laughed at, that people are going to mock you for, that they're going to make fun of you for, but do it because you believe it's correct and you believe you can be successful. And if you do that, you can change the fucking world. And if you don't, you may have a great successful job at a great company, and there's nothing wrong with that if that's what makes you happy. But that doesn't make us all happy.
Right, right. No, very, very, very wise words. Well, that's it for me, Matt. Thank you so much for your time. I've really learned a lot about mining asteroids. Where can we find you on social media?
Yeah, we have the AstroForge Twitter account. It's just at AstroForge. And you can always hit me up on LinkedIn or email me at matt@astroforge.io.